Hey, love, you are listening to the No Boss of Me podcast, and I'm your host, Leanne Hanaway, money coach, wealth educator, and chartered professional accountant. This is a show that helps ambitious women grow and invest their money without shame, worry, or doubt so that they can live the life that they love. Every week, we will be discussing investing to build wealth, navigating personal finance as women, and talking with women entrepreneurs and change makers who are leaving their mark on our world. Without further ado, let's get into it. So I am truly very, very excited to have two beautiful women in front of me because not only are beautiful, they are very knowledgeable about real estate, particularly for first-time buyers, first-generation buyers. We'll get into what that term means. And us as Black women of color. So they are here to share their expertise on buying real estate. So really to get started, let me introduce you to my guests. We have Michelle Glasglow and Elizabeth Anderson. Awesome. They are part of a three-sister duo at Almond Oak Real Estate. So let's get into it. Let's just get a little bit of your backgrounds. Can you tell me a little bit about what brought you to real estate and your experience in real estate?
Okay, well, I have been in real estate for some time now. I was first licensed in 2017, but I have about 16 years in the industry. I was doing real estate law as a law clerk and also just working in the back end in brokerages, helping realtors wrap up the deal. And then from there, I decided to get licensed just because I saw so many things that were going on in the industry that didn't really seem right. And I thought to myself, you know what, I think I could do this and I think I could probably do it better. So I decided to get licensed myself. And then after doing it for some time, Elizabeth was kind of helping me do some administration stuff as well. And then she was talking about she had some interest in doing real estate. She was like, you know what, why don't we do it as a family? So then she convinced Loretta, and then we all just kind of came together as a team. And now we have a sister team.
Amazing. It sounds so interesting going into business, first of all. Like that's already a big challenge. And then going into business with your family and your sisters. I just think that that is very uniquely beautiful. Was it always that uniquely beautiful? Any particular challenges working with family, working with sisters?
Well, I suppose there's definitely challenges. I think that working with anybody, especially when it's starting off a business, there's going to be, challenges because everybody's different. So there's different ideas. I think the nice thing is because we are sisters, we do know each other's strengths and weaknesses. And so we play off of that. But I think also at the same time, being devil's advocate, that's also a bad thing because we do know how to get underneath each other's skin if we really want to. But we know also how to diffuse the situation because we grew up together. So we know what certain triggers are, and we know if this person's in a mood, how to kind of handle them. Whereas if you're going into business with somebody else, you don't have any experience with them outside of professional, you don't really know their triggers. You don't know how to diffuse situations because you don't know them that well. So I think that's what gives us the advantage of being related.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I love that. I love that because self-awareness is so key in every aspect of our lives. Particularly like particularly if you're going to go buy housing as well too. You have to know, you don't want to get seduced by prices. You don't want to get you really want to know what you want. And so that self-awareness and then awareness of what others might want, I think is very, very key. So we're all in the GTA market. And right now in 2023, we've been experiencing a lot of different highs and lows. What can you tell me about the current trends that you're seeing in the market?
So the first thing I would say about the market is that the media is definitely trying to paint a different picture than what's actually happening. You hear a lot of doom and gloom in the media, just trying to put a lot of fear into people about what's happening in the market, telling everybody that prices are going down dramatically. And to be honest, when you look at the statistics, and you look at 2020, 2021, the prices now are even higher than what they were then. Just 2 years ago. Yes, in 2022, prices are higher than now, but that's expected because we just had 8 consecutive interest rate hikes. So even with those 8 consecutive interest rate hikes, the prices are still relatively high for having had that happen. So the market is still very strong, regardless, and despite what the media is trying to tell everybody, we still even have areas where there are multiple offers. We're seeing the market starting to pick up, and just right now, the media is coming out and saying that, you know, they're expecting prices to go up in 2023. These are certain things that realtors have been seeing, and it's very important for people to speak to a realtor because we are in the field every day. So we're seeing this most of the time when the media is reporting on what's happening in the market. They're reporting weeks, sometimes months behind because they're not seeing it happening. They're waiting for statistics to come in before they can report on it. At that time, we've already been seeing it for months. So we're being able to give our clients information. So it's very important that if somebody has questions about what's really happening in the market, that they actually speak to a professional that's working in it, not just taking what they see on the news and believing that to be true. Because again, the media, they thrive off of what's going to get people to react, and there's going to be certain emotions, and a lot of those emotions are negative. That gets people to react, and that's what draws views and makes money, and so that's what they're typically going to do.
Mm-hmm. I take your point a lot about speaking to someone who is operating in the market that you actually want to get into, like someone who has that specialty. Because you're right,
sure.
Not only is it the media speaking to, you know, the overall market, that overall market might not really represent what you want to get into. You know, you might want to get into housing, you might want to get into a condo, you might want to be in the GTA, you might want to be in the Toronto core, or, you know, all those have a different play on what the market looks like really specifically. Are you seeing any trends, particularly for the GTA and Toronto?
I would say that and like the Durham, the East Ends, kind of the outer skirts, we're still seeing prices that are pretty strong. And again, we're still seeing some of those areas having multiple offers. It's more so the areas that are in the inner core, like the city of Toronto, where I find that you saw like more of the dramatic price difference, just because again, those areas had like huge price increases when house prices were increasing. So we definitely are going to see them also have more of a dramatic drop. Some of the outskirts areas as well, I would say that you see quite a bit of a decrease, just because again, when everything was happening with the pandemic and everybody was going to be working at home, then a lot of people thought, well, I don't really need to be this close to work. I can kind of, you know, go out to wherever and purchase a home. But now that, you know, businesses are slowly starting to call their people back to work, you're starting to see not that much interest for some of these outer core areas. Durham is one of those areas, especially Oshawa, where the market has been pretty strong. I think the reason why is because it's still relatively close to the city of Toronto, and because they have the GO Transit. So it's still pretty easy commute. So we're definitely still seeing a pretty strong market over there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, like you said, we've been seeing prices go up, and maybe prices maybe go up, but not as fast as they were before. And in some areas, maybe even leveling off a little bit. If you're a first-time buyer, you've always been renting, you know, what is your strategy really to get into this market if prices are as high as they are?
Well, one of the strategies is first, find a professional to speak to. A lot of the times we kind of want to wait till last minute until we're ready to buy that we want to speak to a mortgage broker. But speaking to them ahead of time kind of puts you in a position that you could kind of know what needs to be done. They're able to look at your credit score. They're able to look at how much down payment, and they could say to you that, you know, you need this much down payment. They could say to you, you know, pay off these line of credits or pay off these credit cards. They could set you up in a situation that you're ready to buy. So those who are thinking are on the fence line of thinking of, okay, do I want to buy? Can I buy? I would say the first step is speaking to a professional who can then pull your credit report. They could then look at your income and say, okay, this is what you could do. This is what you need to do in order to get into buying a property.
So really getting armed with the knowledge, but even before that, you might be scared to pull that report, you might be a little bit apprehensive of really knowing whether or not you're ready. Do you ever encounter clients where sometimes it's like, you got to help them get over the fear a little bit, what are you seeing, and how do you kind of help clients in that respect?
So we do actually had a client recently that was struggling with that, the fear of, okay, I want to buy, what if I can't? And I think the best thing you need to do is find somebody that you can rely on. Find an agent that's going to help you through each and every step. What fear does is paralyzes you. It stops you from going forward, right? And so what we don't want to do is sit in fear, but to have the knowledge that you need to be able to move to the next step, to the next step, to the next step. So we were with them every step of the way, and we helped them by showing them what needs to be done and what they can do. They had their money into RSPs, and we were able to speak to other partners that we have in order for them to get the money up front, so that way they could use for their down payment. So there's strategies, as long as you speak to somebody who's been in the field, then there's a lot of strategies that you can help based off of the situation. Now, every situation is different. So everybody's like, I can't really exactly give you a do this kind of thing, but when you speak to a professional, then they can able to tell you what exactly based on your specific scenario, what to do.
Okay. So if we were to dig into taking that next step, and if that next step was engaging with someone at Elm and Oak, someone who's really a specialist, what do I need to have ready for you to really be in the best position to help me as a first-time home buyer?
So once we get somebody that is new that says, okay, they raise their hand, I want to buy real estate. The first thing we will do is put you in touch with our mortgage broker partner, who will then pull up all the details that they need, ask for all the information to see how much you would qualify for. Once we get that information, we will sit with the homeowner, and sometimes we even sit with the homeowner and the mortgage broker. It depends on how comfortable the homeowner, or not the homeowner, but the buyer feels. If the buyer feels like they really want us to be involved, then we will be totally involved each and every step with the mortgage broker. If not, then we back away, and then they could speak to the mortgage broker themselves. But one thing that we do is we do show them the steps in advance of what needs to be done. What can they expect? Educating them on each and every step. The advantage with us is that we have the real estate experience with law. So Michelle was a law clerk for real estate and wills and estates. So she knows a lot more than some of the regular agents out there, because she's able to provide that information that most agents don't know. So when you're talking about closing, Michelle's able to break it down step by step, what you can expect. And she's also able to contact the lawyers and the mortgage brokers to make sure that they close on time. So at the end of the day, it's knowledge, making sure that you have enough knowledge and making sure that you're aware of each step that needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That sounds still intimidating, but I know you got to make these steps to get forward on your goals, because for often a lot of people, they could be not only a first-time home buyer, they could also be a first-generation home buyer. They might have, parents who came to this country and, they never actually owned a home. I mean, I could talk specifically from my experience, growing up in a single parent household. My mom never owned a home, and it wasn't really on the radar. So not only was it wanted to be on the radar, but again, just maybe a little bit of the fear of owning a home as a single person, and as a new person navigating all the rules in Canada. So one of my first things was, okay, I want to buy my mom a home, and really kind of navigating all that, which made me not only a first-time home buyer, but a first generation home buyer. Are there any particular skills or challenges that you think a first generation home buyer really needs to understand to get into the home buying game? And maybe it isn't a home, maybe it's a condo, maybe it's something pre-construction. Is there any things that you've seen from your experience that could really help that first generation home buyer?
I would say try to get as much knowledge as you can, and um not to be worried or scared to make the step to get into it. For myself, I wasn't a first generation or first time home buyer, but when I first got into the market, it was really my mom that pushed me into it. If she never said, "Okay, you're ready to go," I wouldn't have made the move. Who knows, maybe I would still be renting at this point of time, right? Um, so I did have my
What
mom.
was it with your mom who really was insisting that this was something that you needed to have in your future?
I think it's because what they've done themselves. Like my parents came as immigrants to Canada. So coming as immigrants to Canada, they and themselves had to learn how to buy property and was also told that they couldn't buy property at one point in time because, they were immigrants, right? So seeing my parents move, we moved growing up every 5 years. We moved. My parents was like, we're moving again.
You
And
can
it was
still
really
read
tough on us because we wanted to be with our friends. And my mom's constantly moving. But when we were young, we didn't understand it. But now that we're older, we understand that mom was moving and upgrading each time. I
Mm.
mean, there was a time that we were all sharing one room. And then next thing you know, we moved in and maybe two of us are sharing in one room. And then we eventually had our own rooms and then our own bathrooms. So each and every time mom moved, she upgraded her life, and now to the point that she was able to also buy another property in Jamaica. So I think my mom understood the wealth that could be used when buying real estate. And at that point in time, I was renting. I was renting with my husband. We were a very new couple. And, we were just renting. I didn't even think about home ownership until my mom said, okay, it's time. And I didn't even know what the steps were at that point in time. My mom really didn't help me with the steps, but she gave me the first kick, say, go on, fly now. You're good. You could do this. And I'm very thankful that she did that for us.
I love that. That's like not only was it knowledge, but like an example of how to build wealth and a real way to increase stability and income and growth into your overall family portfolio, and like how you can have a roadmap to grow as well. And what I find is really interesting about that story is that, some people think that their first buy is going to be the house that they're going to stay in forever. And
Mm-hmm.
you just really highlighted in that story that, maybe you start small and then with every progressive property, you can grow your wealth and you can actually get finally to the home that you want to, or maybe even an additional home, abroad, So I think that's just really masterful. Um, so, in what you were doing, are there any particular resources or programs that are available for first generation home buyers that you really want to let my audience know a little bit more about?
So for first generational, there's nothing really for first generational. It's just first time home buyers is like they have programs. The government does have programs. There's two programs right now that they have that could be beneficial to somebody that's looking to get into the market. And it would be beneficial for somebody to look into it. The first one is, the first time home buyer incentive plan. With that plan, the government actually kind of helps you to, what they could do is they call it a shared equity mortgage with the government of Canada. Now, do I 100% like this plan? I kind of don't like this plan because the government is sharing the equity with you. However, it is an option that is out there for first time home buyers.
Can you break
What
it down a little bit more? So how does that work? How do you own a property with the government? Are they on the deed as well too, or the mortgage as well too?
Okay, so what happens is that they sorry. So what happens is that the government offers the first time home buyers 5% as a down payment for the home that they're going to buy. This is only for resale home. If you're going to buy a new construction home, it's usually between 5 to 10%. And then you have to actually pay this back, the down payment back within 25 years, or if you're going to sell the property. So if you keep in mind that because they're giving you their down payment, you still owe that money. In regards to how it looks like on the title, I'm not 100% how that looks. I'm not sure if Michelle knows more details about that, but you do got to pay back this money within 25 years, or if you choose to sell the property.
Okay. Okay. All right. And you don't like that one? Like,
I personally don't like anything that the government's involved in where you got to pay back. One of the reasons is because you got to pay it back. So you got to keep in mind that, can you make back this payment? Right? It does seem like 25 years, but people tend sometimes to wait till last minute to pay. That's how some of these companies like don't pay for a whole year could get people, is because people tend to not pay within before the 12 months, sorry. So because of that, the interest then accumulates. And so I don't really like knowing that people are putting themselves in more debt in order to get a down payment, because you're going to have to eventually, pay up this money.
okay.
That's the reason why I'm not very fond of it. I think that we could try to find ways to save for your down payment yourself. Also using other family members that could possibly help you. That would be better than relying on the government resources.
Okay, makes sense. And you said there was another potential program that first-time home buyers could use?
Yes. So the other one is the home buyers plan. This one's a little bit older, and I think most people know about it. The government allows you to take up to $35,000 of your RSPs to put towards your down payment. This is only for first-time home buyers. Another thing that you need to consider is that you do need to pay it back within 15 years. So when you are considering to do something like this, you want to look at, can you make the repayments? You also want to know that you're taking this money out of your RSPs. So is this going to affect your RSPs savings? So someone who's much younger may not be worried about it because they could pay it back, but somebody who's much older, like, you keep in mind that you're taking that out of your RSPs. So those are the things that you want to consider when you are doing something like that.
Okay. And so with your clients that you work with who are doing this for the first time, is this something that you educate them about? Is there anything else that you kind of share with them to help them on this first journey?
So we definitely educate them on the programs that are available, but we share our thoughts on it, because we want to protect our clients and we want to make sure that they understand. And, as much as the name is sales representative, we're really trying to build connections with people and help them to make the best decisions so that they can create wealth for them and their family. So we want to let them know what the implications are going to be of any of these options, and help them decide whether this is a good option for them or not. And then, as you mentioned, just explaining to them the entire process as to what it will look like if they use these options, what it's going to look like for closing, and make sure that they are completely educated on what they're going to expect. Because, as you mentioned, for first-time home owners and first-generation owners, especially buyers, they don't really know what to expect. It's very overwhelming going to purchase a property. It seems so scary, especially when you're hearing all of these things in the media. So we want to make sure that they understand everything, and that, as Elizabeth mentioned, that they know that we're here to walk them through the process, and we have our partners that we work with and make sure that everybody is on the same page and we all know what's going on, so that we ensure that it has a smooth transition for them.
Mm-hmm. So what does this process normally look like? I mean, is this like 1 month and I'm good, or like, what's your typical length of process, and what could someone expect?
So I think it really depends. We have seen it happen in a month or so. Typically closings can be 60 to 90 days. They can sometimes be less, they could sometimes be more, but generally, the process is you meet with a mortgage broker, determine what your pre-approval amount is. We ensure that, you have your down payment, make sure that they understand deposit versus down payment. A lot of people don't understand what that means. And also a lot of people don't consider closing costs.
Okay, so what is the difference between a deposit and a down payment?
So your deposit forms part of your down payment. The down payment is something that is required for you to be able to purchase the property. So let's just say, for example, you're purchasing a property that's 500,000. Then your down payment is 5% of that 500,000. So that's 25,000. However, you don't necessarily have to give that full 25,000 when you're doing a deposit. The deposit comes in place when you put in an offer on a property. So when you're putting in an offer on a property, there's a few choices for you to give this deposit. You can give it herewith, which means you're giving it at the time that you're presenting the offer, or you can give it upon acceptance, which basically means that, okay, here's my offer. If you accept my offer, this is the deposit that I'm going to give you. And that deposit shows good faith. It shows them that, listen, I'm serious about purchasing your property, because there has to be some form of consideration, or else there is no contract. So the consideration is the deposit. I'm giving you this deposit to show that I am intending to purchase your property. And what essentially happens with that is that, let's just say for some reason the buyer can't close, that deposit is now kept by the homeowner, because you would have forfeited your deposit if you don't close. The only other way that you would get it back is, let's say if you put conditions on, like a home inspection or a finance condition, and then when you do your home inspection, you find something off with the property and you're like, you know what, I don't think I want this property anymore. Because you have that condition, that means you can get your deposit back. But if you have no conditions, or you waive your right to a condition and you give your deposit and you don't close, you forfeit that deposit, and there is that risk of further penalties down the line.
Oh, okay. So if you give a deposit, first of all, there's an amount of deposit that you can decide, working with your realtor, obviously, to give on that particular property, but also working with your realtor, like what conditions might put you in a good position for that offer to be accepted, but at the same time, protect you in case what happening with this property is not everything that it might not be sold to be. But if
exactly.
Yeah, but if the offer doesn't go through, if the offer does go through, that deposit becomes a part of your overall down payment. So
yes,
it's not like it goes to the seller of the property. But if it doesn't go through, do you get that money back? You don't get that money back, is what I'm hearing.
So if the deal doesn't go through because of during your conditional period, then you get your deposit back. So let's just say you put a condition for financing, you hand in all your paperwork, and the lender looks over it and they decide that they're not going to approve this particular property, you get back your deposit. But if you don't put a financing condition and then closing day comes and you don't get a mortgage, then you forfeited your deposit.
Okay.
That's why it's very important that, we're working with the professionals and making sure that everything's above bar, and that we're making sure that that approval is in place so that you can keep your deposit.
I could see this is why you might say work with the mortgage broker first, right? So that you know what you can get that mortgage for, and then maybe it isn't a condition on your offer.
Well, I find that sometimes even with the pre-approval, it's still important to get the condition for financing unless you have extra funds. Because the problem is that your pre-approval is based on you. It's based on your income. It's based on your credit score. But the actual approval is going to be also based on the property. So let's just say, for example, you purchase a property that's 800,000. You purchase it for 800,000. That's what your offer is. But the appraisal from the lender comes back at 750. Well, they're only going to do that certain amount that they agree to. You're going to have to come up with that other 50,000, or you're going to have to walk away. So that's why it's still important to have that condition, because you want to make sure that the property also is approved for the mortgage.
Ooh, okay. So it's not just your approval, it's also approval of the property, because I guess even the bank doesn't want you overpaying for a property. They're not going to give you the mortgage dollars if you overpay for a property, essentially.
Exactly.
So you were saying this is part of the, a typical process. You said something about 60 and 90 days. Can you, Michelle, give a little bit more information about what that means? Or Elizabeth?
So the 60 to 90 days is like the closing. So sometimes on a listing, you'll see possession day 60 days, possession day, 90 days. So essentially what the seller is trying to say that as soon as they have a firm deal, that they need 60 days for closing, or they need 90 days for closing. So whatever that time period may be. Now that is sometimes negotiable. It depends. The seller may need some more time, or the buyer might need to move in a little bit sooner. So they might put in an offer for 30 days, even though it says 60. And then it will be up for negotiation to see if both parties can come to an agreement about what that looks like. But typically the least amount of time, especially when there is a mortgage, is typically about 30 days for closing, just because, again, we need to make sure the mortgage goes through. Lawyers need to do checks on the property, the title of the property, to make sure that that's clear. The seller probably needs to make arrangements. So generally speaking, it's, somewhere between 30 days or more for closing from the time that you actually put in an offer, it's accepted. Anyway, from 30 to 60, 90 days after is when you could be looking to move in. But again, that time period as to when your actual closing day will be something that will be negotiated at the time that you're putting in an offer.
Mm-hmm. So what has been your experience at closing? Is there particular strategies to make your offer be accepted more than another particular offer? I don't know what you've been seeing, and particularly for first-time home buyers, are there certain risks in some of those strategies?
Well, every situation will be different. What we have done before is, we had a first-time home buyer. This was when it was crazy hot and everyone was putting in a lot of offers. I think there was 11 offers on this one property. But our client didn't have a lot of wiggle room when it came onto their financing. So what we did was we encouraged them to write a letter to the seller and, include a picture of them. And to kind of express, how much they love the property, and express a little bit about themselves, who are they? And we actually got the highest, they accepted our offer, even though we weren't the highest offer that came through. So there's things like that can be done to get an offer completed. So sometimes the highest offer is not always the best one, is not always the accepted offer. So that's one thing that people need to keep in mind, and don't be discouraged if you cannot put in a high offer on a deal, because as I said, we have seen where we have got deals accepted even though we weren't the highest offer. So that's one of the things that we do when it comes on to getting an offer accepted. Another thing that we do is we will negotiate, as Michelle was saying, the date that they want to close. When you're talking about negotiation, you want to go as close as you can to what the seller is asking for, because they are the ones, well, depending on the market though, keep in mind.
Okay.
If we're in the seller's market, you want to go close to what the seller wants. If we're in the buyer's market, then we could kind of push a little bit more as a buyer. So it does also depend on what kind of market we're in, and each strategy is going to change based on the market that we're in. So if we're in a seller's market, then we're going to change what we're going to do. If we're in a buyer's market, then we'll change what we're going to do. So it also depends on the market that we're in.
Okay. Can you give me a brief definition on what is a seller's market and what is a buyer's market?
Sure. So a seller's market is when there is less properties on the market. So the sellers have a more advantage than the buyers. This is usually calculated by how long inventory's been sitting on the market. Okay. That's how we usually calculate to know whether it's a seller's market or whether it's a buyer's market. When there's a lot of properties on the market, then it tends to be more of a buyer's market, because buyers have an opportunity to pick and choose now. There's more supply there. So they could pick and choose what kind of property that they want. They could go to one property and then go to another property and say, compare them. Whereas in the seller's market, there's not as many homes on the market, so they don't have too much to really negotiate with. So a strategy would depend on what kind of market that they're in.
Okay. And what kind of market do you think we're in now? We're early February 2023. What would you say? We're in a buyer's market or a seller's market? Or is it that clear cut?
I think right now we are in a seller's market, but heading towards a more of a balanced market.
Ooh, balanced market. Okay. So there is something in between the two.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So in helping first generation, first time home buyers, it sounds like there's so many people involved. We talked a little bit about the mortgage broker, we talked about real estate agent, you know, and then even in like some of the conditions we might have to do with a mortgage specialist. Who are some of the people that a first time buyer really also needs to connect with, and how do you connect them?
So if you're going to get an inspection done, which we highly recommend, inspection done on all properties, unless it's a very brand new home, but in this home inspection, so you'll need an inspector. And that's your agent should be able to refer you to an inspector that they use. A lawyer, you're going to need a lawyer to go over your documents and make sure everything is going to be closed on time. You want to make sure you pick a lawyer that knows what they're doing, but also wants to help you to succeed. You don't want to just go to a lawyer that just wants to close the deal and say, okay, it's done, but one that's going to look out for your best interest. Same thing with a mortgage broker. I think that is it. Am I missing anyone, Michelle?
I don't think so. I think that's
Yeah.
pretty much.
So those are the main players.
Unless for some people, when it comes on to, I think Elizabeth mentioned that in the beginning, when it comes on to maybe trying to find ways to get their deposit, or if they have questions about RSPs, then they may need to speak with a financial advisor just to kind of help them navigate that process as well.
Okay. And in your experience, is it someone should find these other people on their own, or is it someone that they work with their realtor in order to help them with this process?
It could go either way. We have people that we are connected with that we would refer to, but some people prefer to go to their own, use their own people, which is fine as well. Just make sure that if you're going to use somebody, that you do kind of check them out, check out, ask for proof, documentation, especially if it's someone that's doing renovations. You want to make sure that they're doing their work and they know what they're doing. References, ask for references as well. So as long as you do your homework, either way, whether you go to a realtor that has usually realtors do have a database of people that they can refer you to. But if you want to use someone else, that's fine, as long as you do your research.
I think that's a really good like start off point if you're trying to find someone. I'm thinking about the experience when at one point I thought about buying a house, and it was like, maybe I could spend a little less by buying a house that wasn't in the perfect condition and then like renovating it before moving in. And the thought of like what kind of home inspector you would need in that case, it would vary then from a property that you could probably move in and live in just the way it is, particularly for like zoning rules or like what you can actually do on that property given on how it's situated. So I take your point about getting referrals or getting testimonials on who you choose. Any other points? We talked a lot about the closing process. Any other things that you think first generation buyers really have to understand in the closing process?
Not for the closing process, but I do want to say that there's opportunities for first time home buyers. Like there's house hacking. There is, if you're going to buy somewhere, you live in Toronto, maybe consider buying outside of Toronto, where it's a little bit cheaper. And if you can live in it, perfect. If not, then rent that space out. At least you're still building some kind of wealth while you're doing that. There's many ways to buy properties. You just got to be creative and also be willing to sacrifice.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit more. Let's talk about the idea of buying a house or buying a home, but not necessarily living in it as a way to build wealth. You talked about a term before called house hacking. What would that look like? How would you go about doing that?
So house hacking is if, say, for example, I have a property, I bought a house, and upstairs is done, downstairs is done. I might want to live in the basement and rent upstairs. Then the reason why I say the basement is because you could rent upstairs for a lot more money than you could rent downstairs. So the person upstairs could literally be paying your mortgage while you're living downstairs for free or for a little bit of amount. So that's house hacking. So a lot of people need to be considering that. That's a way of considering it, of buying a property. Another way is buying a property with other family and friends. Along as your lawyer explains to you how to set up your the title to make sure that you get what you paid for. That's another option, is buying with other family and friends. When it comes onto buying a property that's outside of the city, outside of where you're living, so either you could rent out that space to somebody, or you could do the commute. When I bought, I was traveling for 2 hours to get to work. Now I know it's not ideal to travel for 2 hours to get to work. However, it was a sacrifice that I did. And then a couple of years later, I made a lot more money from my property and was able to move a bit closer. So that's what I mean by sacrificing. It's just thinking like, how do I, your first home is not going to be your, perfect home with the fence and everything like that. It's not going to be that. Your first home is going to be a stepping stool to move to the next house, to either upgrade or to even buy another property so where you could have more than one property. It's important to think of a home as an investment and not just, okay, I want to live here and just, live this extravagant life. You want to be able to build wealth.
Okay. So that seems very interesting to me, that you're house hacking, living in the basement while other folks are living up top, and it could pretty much fund your whole entire mortgage is what you're saying. So you would just be left with any kind of ancillary type cost, I guess, for that. How does that work from a real estate point of view? Like when I engage an agent, should I know that's something I want to do? And how does that look different than if I was trying to buy a home for me to live in?
So you want to take that one?
Okay, so I think that most people, especially first-time home owners, they don't know about house hacking. So I think that's something that you would discuss with your realtor, and hopefully your most realtors know about it. I think probably all realtors know about it. And so if you're thinking about, you know what, I want to be able to purchase a home, but I'm not really sure how that's going to work with payments, then that might be a suggestion that they would mention to you. Okay, this is something that you could do. We can do house hacking. And then in terms of looking for a property, in that case, what you would want to find is somewhere that you could live in the basement. if that's the way that you're going to do the house hacking, that you're going to want to be downstairs, because you still want to be comfortable. It's your house. You still want to be comfortable. So it has to be somewhere that looks decent, for you to be able to live there, and also somewhere that has like a good rental amount, rental market pricing in that area, so that, because obviously the goal is that hopefully you're not paying anything in terms of the mortgage, that the upper unit is paying for the mortgage. So you're going to want to find those things out. What are the upper units renting for in this area, so that you can have a good indication as to how much you can expect to make.
And I liked what you guys had said earlier, Elizabeth, specifically around using your house as an investment, at least the part that you are not living in as an investment. I'm wondering about, I spoke to this woman earlier. She makes good income, she's in the medical profession and can't really get into the Toronto market at all. Like, just given it's really hard to get in. And then often as a single woman at this point, doesn't necessarily feel comfortable carrying a mortgage of that size. So house hacking sounds interesting, but what about this notion of like buying a place outside of the GTA? Like, can you talk a little bit more about that? And where would you narrow your focus in maybe contemplating that as a way to build wealth and to get into the housing market?
So the GTA is definitely going to be more expensive than some of the outer skirt area, because everybody wants to be, the convenience of being close to all amenities, the convenience of being close to work. So obviously you can get even larger homes, larger lots for much cheaper outside of the GTA. So as Elizabeth said, it's not necessarily for everybody, because for some people, they like that convenience and they don't want to give up the convenience of that. However, if we think long-term, it might be, especially for your first property, might be a very wise decision to do so. As Elizabeth mentioned, I had the same situation. We were actually living beside each other where when I purchased my first house, and I purchased that house for $289. That was about 6 years ago. And that was a 3-bedroom, 2-story house. It was brand new, beautiful home. I sold that house 3 years later for $580.
Wow.
2 years after,
6 years ago? 280.
yes.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, and then a year after we sold that house to them, the buyer that purchased it from us, they sold it for $850.
Wow.
So from $289 to $850. And so, again, even at $850, you would not be able to get that same house in the GTA. So we were able to purchase a bigger house, a nicer house, and move a little bit closer because we made that sacrifice. My husband was working in Scarborough, so it also took him 2 to 2.5 hours, depending on traffic, to get to work, and then another 2.5 hours to get home. A lot of people would be like, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. But the reality is, because we made that sacrifice for those 3 years, we more than doubled what we even purchased the property for. So it's more so sometimes thinking about the long-term goal that you have, and just being willing to make those sacrifices and maybe feel a little bit uncomfort for a short period of time, knowing that you have a goal in mind that you're working towards.
Yeah, I know you guys are coming back to that word sacrifice, and I think that that's a really good point. Like if that's your goal, obviously to reach your goal, you're going to have to take some risks. You're going to have some trade-offs. But the magic is when you get there, right? Like when you get to that particular goal. And I think for a lot of folks who might have a job with a steady income, or at least a way to make a steady income, this is a way you can take risk and to overall grow your wealth, because you do need to take risks either with your job or your asset class, which one of them being real estate, to really grow your wealth. So I really like this idea. I'm just wondering what you guys think about pre-construction, because I haven't really heard that as an option for your first home. Just wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
So pre-construction is it's kind of hard to say now. Pre-construction is something that I loved. And I say loved with a D.
You're laughing in your mind.
It's not that it's completely horrible. It's just right now, like a lot of things changed and came to light during the pandemic. Realistically speaking, when it comes down to pre-construction, tends to be a lot of money to be made. And the reason for that is because you are purchasing a property now for what prices are now, that's going to be ready in 3 or 4 years. And at that point, prices have increased. So you gain all of that appreciation in price during that time period, but you still purchased it at that price. Whereas maybe everything else around you is selling for $1 million. You purchase a house for 600, you're still going to close for that 600. And so because of that, pre-construction was a really great option. But what we saw during the pandemic is a lot of the builders, because of everything happening with interest rates, and then I think supplies started to cost more. A lot of things started happening with the builders where they were requesting more money. They were trying to get people to walk away from their deal because they knew they could sell the house for more than what the person purchased it for. There was a lot of shadiness happening. And so that feeling of uncertainty is why we're a little bit reluctant to give it like a raving review right now. But hopefully, as things are kind of calming down, we will get back to regular programming when it comes on to pre-construction, and that it will continue to be a good option. It was my option. Even the house I live in right now, I paid 600 something for it. We purchased it 2019 or 2020. the late end of 2019. Right now, this house is worth over $1 million. We've lived in it for 2 years. It went to 1.2 8 months after we moved in. So that's the beauty of pre-construction. But I purchased and got in my house before the mayhem. And before this mayhem happened with pre-construction, we didn't foresee these kind of things happening because it didn't happen. Like whatever you contracted to purchase the house for, that's what was going to happen. The builder was going to, fulfill that. But what we saw during the pandemic was that was not happening. And so because of that, we're a little bit reluctant to give it the raving reviews that we would love to. Again, hopefully as things start to calm down in the future, we can have that confidence back into pre-construction. But right now, what we would say is to just, number one, make sure that you're purchasing, if you do go that option, with a reputable builder. Definitely make sure that you have your contract reviewed by a lawyer. If you purchase a condo, you have your 10-day cooling off period where you're automatically allowed to go and take that to your lawyer to review. When you're purchasing a freehold property, you don't have that 10-day cooling off period. You have to request it. And this is why a lot of builders don't like to deal with realtors, because they know that we know the ins and outs to protect people. So they'll try to dissuade buyers from bringing their realtor because, number one, they don't want to pay commission. And number two, they know that the realtor is going to come in and start demanding all of these things to protect the consumer. They don't want that. But realistically speaking, you do need to have a condition for your lawyer to review because a lot of builders will have a lot of extra fees that are written in there, and you need your lawyer to be able to review it and to request that those fees are capped to a certain extent so that they don't continue to increase. And then when you're ready to close on your property, you have this astronomical bill that you're like, how did it get to this number? So there's a lot of things that go into pre-construction. And as I said, a lot of the cracks that were there, that were hidden, were really made relevant and prevalent for us all to see during the pandemic and everything that happened with that.
I like that. Go ahead, Elizabeth. Sorry.
One thing I want to add to what Michelle said, if you're taking your documents to a lawyer, make sure the lawyer is familiar with pre-construction, because there is lawyers that do real estate. You're going to go to a real estate lawyer, right? But not all of them are familiar with pre-construction. And as Michelle says, if those fees are not capped, you could spend a lot more money. Some people think that pre-construction is always the cheaper way, but if those fees are not capped, you're probably paying more than you would have paid if you did a resale.
Oh, wow. Okay. And those types of fees are like, is that the developmental charges and stuff like that? Or
yes. Yeah, the developmental charges, the levies, things that they add in. Like, it's just a lot of like wording that they put in. We know of somebody recently that had a problem with pre-construction where there was a clause in there that they didn't see that said something that if the builder for some reason assumed or had the inclination that you were purchasing with somebody that wasn't a relative, that you would be required to give an additional $80,000. Well, that happened. And the builder had no proof of this, but they used the fact that clause was in there to be able to request that additional 80,000, obviously hoping that the person probably wouldn't have the 80,000 and walk away so they could resell the property, but they did. And they were able to give that 80,000. So there's a lot of things, as Elizabeth said, it's very important that it's not just any lawyer, that it's a lawyer that can look for a lot of that small wording that's in there to protect the builder. And you need somebody that's going to look at it through the eyes to protect you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like pre-construction is just an even added layer of risk that you are putting on to this first purchase. Not only you're basically buying the builder's promise, right, to build that. So versus in all the other cases, buying something that actually has walls, the quality of those walls is what you need to test, but like otherwise it already is something of value that is already there. So I take your point, and I could see why you didn't want to talk about it, but I'm 100% glad that you did. I'm 100% glad that you did. So I think we're kind of wrapping up our conversation, but is there any other advice that you want to give to the first generation home buyer looking to purchase a home in the near future?
Any advice? I think one of the big things is kind of what Elizabeth touched on, getting out of this idea that you're going to be buying your forever home, getting out of this idea that it has to be comfort, getting out of this, and not to the point that you're going to be discomfort in your home, that you're not going to feel comfortable. But what I mean is just understanding that you're trying to get into the market, and that eventually you will be able to use stepping stones and get to your goal. But right now the goal is to get in the market, because once you get in the market, it's much easier for you to move up. So just letting go of the idea that you're purchasing the perfect home. And a lot of people will be like, oh, I just don't like, just like random things. I don't like the flooring. Well, the flooring can be changed. I mean, like if everything else is great, yeah, if everything else is great, we don't want to like nitpick at those kind of things, because number one, if you change it, then hey, you probably just increase the value of your property. But also at this moment in time, it's just about you being the first person to purchase, and you making your first purchase. That's what it's about. And then from there, then we can move up to the best floors and the best layout and the best area. But first, we're gonna make that stepping stone first.
I love that, to be the first. Be the first.
I think for myself too is just do it. Like if you can, if you have the resources, get into the market. I remember, there's a couple of houses that my husband and I wanted to buy. And when we were looking at the prices, they were at that time around 700,000. We're like, oh, that's really expensive. This was a couple of years ago, but that's really expensive. Now they're going for 1.2. Some of the areas actually are going for $2 million. I mean, if I bought that property and sat on it, so real estate is not getting cheaper. It does have its ups and downs, but at the end of the day, it's not getting cheaper. And the longer you wait, there's a chance that you might actually miss out altogether. So if you can get in and start building that wealth.
Yeah. And I really love that you guys talked about strategies to get in, and really, again, not thinking that getting into the market, it's going to be your forever place, to take that first step. So that is really beautiful. So I have one last question for you both, and I'll let Elizabeth answer first and then Michelle. So it's really to complete this sentence with one word, and the sentence is: wealth is
freedom. Wealth is freedom.
Michelle?
Wealth is power.
Ooh, beautiful. Thank you so much, Michelle and Elizabeth, 2/3 of the duo at Elm & Oak Real Estate. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
This has been another episode of the No Boss of Me podcast. I'm Leanne Hanaway, money coach, wealth educator, and chartered professional accountant. If you have feedback on today's episode, don't forget to rate us and review us wherever you get your podcast. You can also DM us on Instagram at No Boss of Me. We'd love to hear from you. Please join us again next time for more on investing to build wealth, navigating personal finance, and talking to women entrepreneurs who are changing our world with confidence. Thanks for listening.